Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale. Today we're going to talk no legendary decks. So on the screen right now you can see the highest win percentage decks, and that goes for every single one of the decks that I'm going to be sharing today. This is not anecdotal. It's not what deck looks the coolest. It's what deck actually wins the most, citing statsroyale.com as the source. So again, these might not be decks that I personally love the most, but hey, the proof is in the pudding. These are the decks that are actually winning with no legendary cards on ladder. So the decks that I just flashed on the screen right there are the top decks that I would recommend for you guys if you're just starting out, or maybe you're starting a second account, or maybe your friend who's a noob is starting out in the game. Those are really the best decks for arenas 1 to 5-ish. And when you get into arena 6, you're going to want to start using decks like these, if at all possible. Golem Barrel and Hog Rider are going to be some of your strongest win conditions, especially in early to mid-level arenas. So in this deck here, we're going to be utilizing a few cards that you don't see too often the more you level up, but that's part of the game. The meta actually shifts and changes the more you progress on ladder. So this deck is really fun. It's a bait deck, but it also has a Hog Rider. The Golem Barrel and the Hog Rider are two win condition cards, meaning that you can use them or build a deck around them to win the game. By the way, if you're a more advanced player looking for no legendary decks, we will cover a few great options all the way up until legendary arena towards the end of today's video, including how to make predictive plays on both offense and defense with Hog Cycle, again, towards the end of today's video. So here, basically with this deck, what you're going to be trying to do is get your Golem Barrel onto the opponent's tower when they don't have a good counter in hand, and you want to be using either the Baby Dragon, the Prince, or the Hog Rider acting as a tank to distract the Crown Tower from shooting your goblins from the Golem Barrel. So you're primarily going to be combining one of those tank cards with the Golem Barrel. And you can see doing an okay job of that so far, going up against Lava Loon. We're not going to be covering any Lava Loon in today's video, guys, because that's a legendary card. Now, where does the Hog Rider fit in all of this? Well, as I said, Hog is one of your tanky type cards that you can use to do damage and distract your opponent's Crown Tower. But other than that, you have a lot of defensive options in this deck as well. That's really why I like this deck, and that's why you can tell it has a really high win percentage as compared to all other decks for Arena 6. So here we're just going to be using our Zap spell. If you have the Log for any reason, you want to try this deck out, you can use the Log in place of Zap. And if you have a much higher level Knight than you do Prince, you can use the Knight instead of Prince, and the deck will still have the same utility. I'm going to give substitutions for every card as we go through today's video. By the way, guys, it's a new season. How did you do last season? I tilted so bad. I was playing in bed at the end of the season, and I dropped 300 trophies over the course of 2 hours in bed. Yeah, my girlfriend wasn't too happy with me. But anyway, moving on, this is the Arena 7. I will be opening up my draft chest in either tomorrow's video or the video after that. I have 2 double upload videos coming the day after today. But hey, half of you are watching in the future, and you don't care what the heck is going on with tomorrow's videos. So here, this is actually the same deck, and I promised you guys I would stay with the highest win percentage decks, and wouldn't you know, this is very similar, except the Valkyrie is in this deck. And that's really important because as you start to go up against Graveyard, you're going to want a good answer to that in your deck. The same thing goes against Swarmy type decks. Valkyrie is a really strong defensive card. Now, there used to be a deck in the game called the Trifecta, where the Hog Rider, the Musketeer, and the Valkyrie all in the same deck, built around that type of synergy. This is not the Trifecta deck. It's much differently. The Valkyrie, instead of acting as more of a tanky character, is going to be really good for defense, and then going to be really solid on a counter push to combo, say, the Golem Barrel with afterwards. So your main defensive options in this deck are going to be Skeleton Army, Wizard, of course, and Valkyrie. Those are going to be your real strong defensive options. If your opponent comes at you with a Golem or a Giant or a big tanky unit, then you might want to go ahead and use the Prince as your option against that. And again, just like the previous deck, if your Prince is low level because it's an epic card, epics are notoriously difficult to level up. As a matter of fact, I just maxed out my first legendary card, the Princess, without having max epics. Man, that's kind of weird, right? I mean, to me, it seems really off and weird, but hey, just what the game gave me, right? So here you go. You can see at this point, I already have that left tower down really low, so I'm going to start focusing on the right lane. And now I have my zap spell always at the ready in case, especially if my opponent has skeleton army. The zap is obviously the best counter against skeleton army, and I want to be aware of that on my side as well. You can see I just was, punished by the zap spell on my skeleton army, and my opponent's Hog Rider was able to get a few hits in on my left tower. Now, meanwhile, you can see I got a really nice push going on the right with the Hog Rider, the Valkyrie, and the Goblin Barrel. That's like the new trifecta. Of course, that's a term that's really overused in the game, but it's a really, really lethal combination. Remember, Valkyrie after a defense, you're not going to just want to start and play the Valkyrie at the bridge. Rather, you're going to want to defend with the Valkyrie and then send in the Hog Rider and the Goblin Barrel. It's a really tough combination for your opponent to stop. So here you can see I take down both of the towers and we pull off the victory here. By the way, I am on my free-to-play account for the first few replays, and then we're going to shift to my main account for the last replay. I really want to talk about prediction plays. It's so important on Hog decks. You can see this is the best Arena 8 and 9 deck win percentage-wise. Remember, this is a very heavy deck, so you don't want to be too aggressive with it. That really goes for all of these decks, but this one especially. It's definitely the heaviest deck in the game that's actually viable on ladder. Now, there's one thing that we really have to discuss before we get too in-depth on this deck, and that's the Three Musketeers. So Three Musketeers appeared in a lot of decks, and in full disclosure, the Three Musketeer minion horde deck with just the Knight in the pump and Goblin Gang was actually the highest win percentage deck in Arena 9, excuse me, I want to say. And I'm not going to share that one only because I didn't want to share too many Three Musketeer decks. And the reason being is because Three Musketeers, if you don't have them leveled up properly, you can really get punished by your opponent's Fireball one-shotting your Three Musketeers, and that really hurts. So I just wanted to include one Three Musketeer deck, and the reason I'm including this one is A, it has the highest win percentage in Arena 8, and B, it's really good, especially when you get to double elixir time. Now, I don't mind losing a tower early on with this deck. With a deck like this, a really heavy deck, it's a good rule of thumb. No matter, the more expensive the deck that you're using, the more you're going to want to go ahead and use your tower's health as a resource. What does using your tower's health as a resource even mean? It basically means that you're okay with taking damage. It's totally cool. You're okay with even losing a tower, because once you get to double elixir time with 1 minute left in the match, you're gonna have the huge advantage, and you might just get a 3 crown on your opponent. So here we go. I'm getting some damage done on the right lane, actually, as a matter of fact, so I'm pretty happy about that. I'm gonna defend against this Goblin Barrel here. It was kind of an ill-advised Goblin Barrel on my opponent's part there. Goblin Barrels, just like Graveyard, remember guys, they're much less effective once you have one tower down. So once the King Tower is activated, you're gonna have 2 crown showers, boom, 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 shooting at your Goblin Barrel, okay? So make sure you're aware, guys, that just like Graveyard, you don't want to necessarily just shoot a naked Goblin Barrel into your opponent's tower once there's only 1 crown tower left. Does that make sense? So here we go. I have 3 Musketeers. I have a Golem. I said this deck was incredibly strong. I'm distracting the splash damage, the Witch, and the Baby Dragon with my Golem there, so I'm going to send in the Minion Horde, and now I'm going to play my Battle Ram in the pocket, make contact with that left tower, and things all of a sudden have turned dramatically in our favor. favor with this deck. I really do like this deck. It's very heavy, but if you play it passive enough and focus on just pumping up in the early game and just mitigating damage, taking some chip damage or a big push, if your opponent gives you the opportunity, it can be really successful. Now, this is the deck that we have to talk about. It is Rocket Mortar Cycle. Now, this is played with Log, but you can also play it with Zap. So we're going to be playing the Zap version, making sure that we stay with the no legendary theme. This is probably the most powerful free-to-play deck when you get to legendary arena. So these last two decks I'm going to be sharing with you guys would really be my recommendation for the best two decks that you can use. No legendary cards in actually arenas 10 and 11. So if you need a good deck to get you past that 4,000 trophy hurdle, I know that's a problem area with a lot of you guys, you can definitely use this deck. It's really, really strong, but it also has a decent skill cap. What does that mean? It means that you have to play it for a little bit. You can't just pick up these decks and have immediate success. Maybe you can, maybe you're a natural, but you have to give these decks a fair shot. There's plenty of Mortar players way above 5,000, even above 5,500 trophies at the end of each season. One of them could be you. So if you like Mortar decks, I would really strongly advise you focus on leveling up these cards in this deck. There's only one rare, I think, in this deck. I'm looking at the screen right now. I think it's just the Rocket, if memory serves me correctly. So it's really easy to level up this deck. That's why it's so good on ladder. A common win condition in the Mortar is a nice alternative to having to resort to the Royal Giant, the Elite Barbarians, right? Mortar, it just feels a little bit cleaner, a little bit less dirty, and there's a reason for that. So let's talk about defensive Mortars. You can see the gameplay here. It was actually pretty good for me, considering I'm not a huge Mortar guy, generally speaking. I'm more of a Hog player. But what you want to do with the Mortar, if you sense a big push is coming from your opponent, you want to go ahead and place the Mortar where I have it right now as a defensive structure. It's not only going to pull the tanks or shoot the 3 Musketeers from a distance, but it's also, say your enemy's coming at you with a P.E.K.K.A. or a Golem or a Giant. It's going to shoot down the supporting troops because of its range restrictions. Now, this deck is also all about predictive plays. Predictive plays is going to be a big theme of this episode, guys, especially when you're using these faster cycle decks. Being a good predictive player is going to take you a long way. So look at this. I am level 9 going up against a level 11 with max elite, or not max, with level 11 with level 11 elite barbarians. Geez, is that coming out right? Gosh. But you can see I'm lucky to have my commons at level 9. I'm still able to pull off the victory. The elite barbarians don't bother me in the slightest. This deck cycles to Mortar really, really quickly. Make sure you learn what your opponent has. Make sure you're using the Knight and the Ice Spirit and the Skeletons as kind of a support guard for your Mortar, and make sure you're not over-committing to supporting your Mortar. This deck cycles so quickly that you can actually cycle back to Mortar oftentimes and be better off than over-defending or over-supporting your Mortar. Now let's get into this replay I was talking about. It's the classic Hog cycle deck. I love this deck, guys, and you can use it way up to 6,000 trophies. It doesn't even matter. Sushi Pepe would advise everybody play this deck. It's one of his favorites in the game. If you missed that video, I highly recommend you watching it. He gave some really valuable advice. Now, the reason I'm showing you this replay, first of all, it's against a level 12. I'm a level 13, so it's not like I feel special winning this battle, but I want to show you the power of predictive plays on defense. We normally talk about predictive plays on offense, but take a look at this, guys. I think when we get into about a minute left, you're going to see how I really take advantage of my opponent by being unpredictable. And this is something, regardless of the deck you're using, that you're going to want to watch and hopefully take a lot from. So here early on, I'm just trying to gauge what my opponent has as a counter to the Hog Rider, and I want to try to understand what my opponent's win condition is and how I can best defend it. Now, I have archers in this deck. Sushi Pepe advises you use archers unless your Musketeer is max level, or depending on your arena level, if you're lower level arenas, you can go ahead and use the Musketeer if she's you know, over leveled or at level, but you want to be careful of the Musketeer. You don't want to have her get one shot by the Fireball. You want your opponent to have to use a Fireball +2 plus Zap or a Log to take out your Musketeer. So I'm going to use Archers here, and Archers are even better in a lot of situations than the Musketeer, for example, against Graveyard decks. So if I was going to play this deck in a tournament level standard, I would definitely play Archers over Musketeer because there's much more Graveyard at tournament level standards. Now let's start paying attention to predictive plays here. So my opponent has Hog and Fireball, and I noticed that I used my cannon previously up until now in the match closer to my King Tower. I knew he had Hog and Fireball in hand, so I played my cannon closer to the river to avoid that predictive Fireball, and it worked out really well. Meanwhile, my opponent makes the mistake of not doing that, and I'm able to land a predictive Fireball, and although my Hog doesn't get a hit on the tower, he used a ton of elixir trying to stop that push. Here comes another Hog Rider, and look at the cannon in a complete new location. The opponent predictably Fireball where I put the cannon the previous cycle. So I'm really doing a good job at making sure I add a lot of prediction or a lot of uncertainty into where I'm placing my cannons on defense and where I'm using my Fireballs on offense. So guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you liked this format. I know these are a viewer favorite. There's a lot of players out there with maybe only one or a few legendaries, so it's good to have really solid options on a he Fireball my King's Tower. It's good to have solid options for decks that don't need legendaries to be successful. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video on decks with only one legendary and none others. Then maybe that will help some of you free-to-play players who have a couple legendaries but not a ton of them. If you like that idea, let me know. And that is going to be it. Guys, make sure you give some love to my YouTube partner, Bren Chong. His information is in the description below. Show him some love. He's a great guy. And thank you so much for watching. It really means the world to me, guys. I say that every video, but I mean it every video. So thank you. And as always, take care, guys.